Welcome to Nature's Guardians. I'm Micah Siegel. Each week I talk with people working to save and help animals around the world. They are nature's guardians, and you can become one too. Today I'm talking with Bernadette Clemens from Tusk. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Micah.
Excited. So, what's the hottest topic on your plate right now?
Coming up very soon in Rwanda, March 4th through 8th, Tusk is convening its biannual Tusk Symposium with dozens and dozens of wildlife conservation organizations from most of African countries coming together for 4 days straight with Tusk as convener. And the Tusk Symposium, as it only happens every 2 years, really is pivotal at connecting different organizations, oftentimes across borders, for collaboration, to discuss their challenges and successes, to really move the needle forward on Pan-African conversation and conservation, both. And oftentimes, as they come out of that symposium, they submit to Tusk collaborative grant proposals that they otherwise would not be able to because they haven't dialogued before. So we fund most or all of those, and convening is something that Tusk does well. So that will take place in Rwanda in just a couple of weeks, and that's top of mind.
So, let's get into the presentation and what we can learn about Tusk.
Awesome. I'm so glad to share about Tusk with you, Micah, and all of your audience. Tusk was founded in 1990 by our current founding president, Charlie Mayhew. So we've been around a very long time and have lots of strong relationships across many countries in Africa, many types of organizations and protected areas, species. It's really a tremendous organization. Prince William became our royal patron in 2005. We were only his second charity he ever took on when he finished college. So you can imagine that he's had a tremendous influence with us, and our founding president was really one of his mentors in the sector of African conservation.
Awesome.
It's great to have his leadership, involvement, and advocacy for us.
Yeah.
He really helps us actually with our Tusk Conservation Awards, which I'll share in this presentation. And what I'm going to do is start with an introductory video about Tusk.
We are part of nature, and we're not being very kind to this world.
In South Africa, there are rhino killed every single day, and it just doesn't seem to be slowing down. It doesn't seem to be going away.
We suddenly saw we could do better here.
This is for us. This is our future.
Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Tusk has become a potent force in conservation, and now you can look and see all the projects that are making a difference.
We have had a dramatic reduction since 2015 in our poaching numbers.
Elephants are expanding once more into the territories that they haven't been using for 50 years.
We aim to get the youth more excited and involved in conservation.
We are taking conservation education to the political class at the state level and at the federal level.
If we all do our jobs, if we all do our work, we have got a bright future.
The work that Tusk does has never been more important. Africa remains on the front line of conservation. You are truly inspiring and give us all hope that change is indeed possible.
So Tusk's mission is to accelerate the impact of African-driven conservation. And we believe that conservation works best when it's about people, right? Because then practices change with sustainable outlook. And what we really do across Africa is we protect endangered species, we preserve the habitats, we promote human-wildlife coexistence, and mitigate those instances of conflict. And we also support the project partners who deliver environmental education to their communities. So those are the 4 wheelhouses of our mission. And we partner with projects that protect all sorts of endangered species across most of sub-Saharan Africa, dozens of projects. So you can really see the footprint here of our impact. And I want to tell you about the Wildlife Ranger Challenge. In September, it all culminates when rangers, thousands of rangers across most countries in Africa, on September 21st this year, will run a half marathon with up to 50 pounds on their backs. They have a specific weighed amount they have to carry on their back through a half marathon, and it's in kilograms, but it's almost exactly 50 pounds. Very heavy, and they train for it all year. And the teams register from their own NGO or protected area, and they compete across the whole continent for one winner on the speed of their half marathon with 50 pounds on their backs, their ranger kit. Beyond the September half marathon, the rangers do several other challenges in competition. We call them mini challenges in the summer to gear up as they train for this half marathon and create other opportunities to compete and win.
What are the top 10 threats to rangers?
Oh gosh. Violence against rangers from poachers is the number 1 threat. And I want to hover on that threat for a minute because it's really complicated, right? In Africa, there are many protected areas where local communities have relied on certain economies, certain food sources for an endless amount of time, or in recent years, perhaps have relied more on certain economies or certain sources of food. And so just because a specific animal is endangered doesn't mean necessarily that the local people would not be able to rely upon that animal. Likewise, there's another layer of livestock issues where human wildlife conflict arises because an endangered species is also a predator of a certain farm and agricultural system that the local people rely upon to feed their children. There's also a lot of political unrest across different zones and even warfare zones in nations where the violence that's going on in the local area actually can be a risk to the rangers. And then the third, I would say, as I've learned from the honor roll of fallen rangers, is really natural causes. So the rangers are out in tremendous weather events, in tremendous storms, tremendous hazards in their physical environment to their vehicles and themselves. And sometimes that can cause injury or death to be in a very rugged environment, depending on your equipment also, which is why it's so important to have these rangers well equipped. My favorite animal is a giraffe all my life, not just African animal, but period. And I was really gripped when I saw one of our reels because I have a colleague who, a team who they manage all of our wonderful Instagram stories. And there was a video of about 5 African individuals, including a couple of rangers, around a giraffe lying down whose leg was caught in a snare, in a trap. And I had to watch it several times because they successfully freed this giraffe from the snare, and the giraffe stood up. The giraffe had been caught for more than one day, so it had been lying down for a long time. And with such a large animal, I think they weren't sure about its stability as it tried to stand. But to see a giraffe, so my point is, I've never seen a giraffe stand up from a lying down flat position. Have you?
I've never seen a giraffe.
But even on video or TV, I've never seen a giraffe stand up. So when I saw this giraffe get up, and you could see the people around like step back because it's not only such a large animal, but it's a really big movement to get that animal up. So yes, those people arrived at that fallen animal and that trapped animal at different times. The animal had been trapped for over 24 hours and it was still alive. It survived. They successfully freed it. But it's a sticky process who arrives to that animal first. One of the partner I mentioned before, Conservation South Luangwa in Zambia, they have another asset in there. They have airborne rangers. They have specialists who fly small airplanes with special cameras on their wings so that they have a chance of intercepting and getting to wildlife before poachers would, as far as that time sensitive, like competition to avoid an altercation.
Do you know anything about poaching groups in Africa?
This just took place yesterday with Herp Conservation Ghana. And Caleb, the leader and scientist of Herp Conservation Ghana, grew up in Ghana and has become a leading expert and successful achiever in the conservation of endangered frog species. And poaching most often happens for food. So an example with the endangered frogs in Ghana, in particular the Togo slippery frog in the Togo Hills and the forests of Ghana. This frog, among other frogs in that region, is most often hunted for food. Caleb was able to go to where people gather most, and in West Africa and in Ghana, that's oftentimes church and mosque communities. So he has this interesting solution called conservation evangelism, where he wraps philosophy and morality and good deeds in large public gatherings where people would get together with the conservation message, and how frogs particularly help with medicines for disease. So Caleb was sharing how specific secretions from a number of the endangered frogs right in this rainforest in Ghana have tremendous power to heal human disease. And he's able to spread that word. And so even the young people and the community leaders, the elders, are now shifting their perspective on what frogs are for and why it might be best to eat certain frogs but protect endangered frogs. Another thing he did was create marketing campaigns. So he has billboards and he has t-shirts that young adolescents are wearing in the community. And on the front, it says, "I love frogs." And on the back, it says, "Ask me why." And he's been very successful. He has grown his protected area and the country's protected area there from a few hundred hectares to many, many thousands of hectares in just 5 years, 5+ years. So extraordinary success there.
How big are the frogs? Because I can't really imagine. I'd have to eat like 20 frogs to be full for the entire day. So
right, and some of these frogs are quite big. So he showed us some pictures, and we're talking about like 10-inch. Most of them were on average 10 inches long.
What have you learned from some of the projects that haven't worked?
Oh boy, that's such a good question. If somebody has a great idea and passion for preserving specific habitat, the failure most often happens when the community doesn't get successfully hooked in. And by community, I mean specifically the local government, the schools, the economic practices of the people who live on or near the protected area. And whether those economics have to do with food or other sources of revenue, beyond food, it's both. So going back to my previous example, one of the other things Caleb has done that is successful to prevent that kind of failure is he's not just protecting the rainforest. His tree nursery, where his organization grows seedlings for the rainforest, also grows apple trees from Kenya. He provides the apple tree seedlings to the backyards of the local community so that they can grow apples as a source of produce revenue, not just food. So the failure comes if you don't do things like that where you're getting the community vested, their practices shifted, even just tweaked a little bit, right? You can't maybe change everything, but if you start making shifts like that, introducing apple trees into backyards, introducing different sources of food and revenue other than the endangered species, that's how you avoid the most common type of failure.
Is there a specific story that you liked but didn't get an award?
There is a ranger. He had spent most of the year training for that very half marathon I told you about with the 50 pounds on his back. He'd lost a ton of weight. He had been obese and he was now fit. And he'd been sort of depressed in his previous ongoing rhythm. And he was now invigorated and had lost his former depression, tendency to feel depressed. And he and his comrades, who were also helping him tell the story and share the picture, he was so grateful to the Wildlife Ranger Challenge and all of the rangers that had participated, even those beyond his team, because it changed his life. And he never could have anticipated it. So he participated just like his teammates, but he lost all this weight, is keeping it off, changed his practices, changed his mood. So that story for me answers the question of why Tusk produces the Wildlife Ranger Challenge. It's not just to raise money. It's not just to teach the world a better and more accurate narrative of who rangers are and what they do, and that they're not just men with guns. But more particularly, they are human beings who are bending over backwards to serve their local community, protect the landscape, and protect wildlife who deserve and need protecting due to being endangered or threatened.
What are your stretch goals for the next 30 years?
So we have this tremendous Pan-African conservation education program, aka PACE, and over 1 million young students in Africa over 15 years plus that this PACE program has been in place.
I believe in the power of kids and kids making the future for themselves. So what advice do you have for me to help kids be part of the solution?
I'm a big believer in conversation, like what you and I are doing right now. I don't think there's anything more important that people can do than the thing you're doing, Micah, which is you reached out to Tusk and said, would you be willing to talk with me? Because I do that and then I share the conversation with others. It's one thing to understand that conservation is important to the planet. It's another thing to even understand the value of an endangered species and the catastrophe that happens when a species goes extinct. But spreading the word of mouth and discourse, dialogue, discussion, that's the most powerful tool on the planet, right? Word of mouth, storytelling. Follow in Tusk's footsteps, amplify the voices of the people who are coming up with the solutions, and shine a spotlight on it, just like you're doing.
Great. Thank you for talking with me, Bernadette, and thank you for watching. You can help animals by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. I'll see you next time on Nature's Guardians. Bye.